So yeah, the topic of the conversation that we want to have, really what we want to start from is the subject line of the conference today. It's really about how do we connect what we've been hearing about to driving value in the real estate, construction, city-making processes. You know, if we try to think about what value means for a minute, you know, it's a somewhat nebulous term, and I think one of the reasons why we have such trouble articulating who we are and what we need and how we provide purpose and opportunity is it's very difficult to define what value means. For me, coming from the world of real estate and construction, it's really about improving the balance of that pie that we divide into three of speed and quality and time, and well, it's speed, quality, and time. And for what happens generally in traditional projects is you can kind of get two of those things, and you really struggle to get the third. Value, I think, is that improved balance, and then, of course, growing the pie overall. We've heard a number of technologies today that really can help us do that, but making the link between what those technologies stand for today and the aspirations and the imagination of the leaders and what we as practitioners know as the reality of construction is, I think, worthy of further exploration. Clint has mentioned that the construction industry as a whole is woeful when it comes to investing in R&D. That stat of 0.4% of every dollar that goes into our economy is going into that real estate, research and development. It's like we are so far behind anything else. You know, even manufacturing and the farmers are ahead of us. So that, I think, is where we want to start today. I'm not sure whether if I sit down here, you guys are going to see me. Are you able to see everyone okay? Because there's a big podium in the way. Are you all right? Shall we try? Just to get the fireside. Oh, nope, that's not working. Okay, so I'm going to stay here. I'm going to ask you questions. Is that okay? And feel free to go backwards and forwards. So the way this is going to work is I'm going to throw a question out to you. You guys are alpha folks. Jump in. If you see a question that you want to take, jump in. If you want to riff off somebody else's conversation, feel free to do that. You are the experts, I'm not. Anyway, first question I wanted to ask was, because Mike was the last speaker and some of the topics that he was mentioning were sort of top of mind, what I want to really start with is the people element. You guys are working in industries where we hear that labor, like talented labor to support your business is really hard to find. What are you doing specifically to address that? We heard about Mike. It's hard, you said. You didn't say how hard, and you didn't say what you did to solve that. And where are you looking for folks to come and join your companies? So, Mike, do you want to start and then maybe hear from the other guys?
Yeah, sorry. So our focus has always been individuals coming out of BCIT. That's where I came from, and that's where predominantly we've found talent. But we're finding talent off the tools is where we're also elevating people off the tools. And what the biggest challenges is getting the stigma away from, you know, construction is a dirty trade. We've got carpenters in our business that are making over $100,000 a year working for us, and so that stigma of the old way that, you know, that industry is you know, being in the construction industry isn't right. But when you have good culture and you have good people and you have your friends out there, all of the people that work with me are friends, selling the good story that, you know, we have an amazing place to work where you're appreciated. You have unlimited training. So we pay 100% of training. If you want to go in any training you want of any sort of schooling, we'll pay for it. We'll put you back in school. If you want to go to a place where you feel welcome, where you have good mentors, and you sell that story, that's how we're able to attract people. It's hard, but it's getting easier as our team grows and there's more tentacles in the marketplace. I do lots of events like this. It's important for people to know who we are, what we're about, and really making sure that you're taking care of them like it's a family. And that's been forgotten and lost, in my opinion. Not because people don't want to, but as companies grow and times change, it's just not there anymore, that fit. So. And
for Dogu, say, you're at a very leading edge technology area. I mean, are you finding that there are folks you can hire with the skills you need, or are you still having to do a lot of training?
It works in a couple different directions for us. Vancouver in particular is pretty well versed in interactive technologies when it comes to, like, there's electronic arts here, there's like Vancouver Film School, there's talent that is like homebrewed here. And that's particularly why I moved to Vancouver as well from my home country. It's easy to find local talent, but we took a different direction with it. We actually adopted the future of work model. We can do that. We're not in construction, so we don't need to be physically somewhere unless that experience requires us to be there. But what we did was we allocated a bunch of talent from all around the world. So we got our full-time 3D developers, artists, everyone who can create extremely realistic visualizations. And we let them be wherever they want to be. So our artists are in Singapore, Australia, Turkey, Moscow. We have full-time artists there that we're working with, and we're utilizing technology because now it's all housed in one Slack channel, for example, that you are using in an office. We're doing it like all globally. And that becomes really interesting to work and manage the expectations or celebrate their accomplishments or our company accomplishments. We get on Skype to celebrate a closed deal, for example, all of us, and or you send e-gift cards instead of paying for their training or paying for their restaurant bill over here in Canada. And that's one way to be able to create affordable services as well, provide affordable services too.
And so, Mark, in UrbanLogiq, your world is around helping governments, and that, in my mind, to find somebody who has got an intimate understanding as to how governments work and has therefore worked in government, and at the same time is a leading-edge technology expert, it's almost like that's a contradiction in terms, is it not?
It is, and so we actually had to make that kind of a call about what's the harder part to get here. Is it the technology or the government? And we made, if you actually look at our teams and our bios, you'll notice it's kind of, actually until lately, it was actually fairly on the technical side. And what we did is basically, for example, Leah, so she was a political strategist, worked in Ottawa as an advisor to a minister. And yeah, we wanted someone who understood how government worked and what the actual problems of the people we're trying to solve are. Because we said that's the harder part to get, is what is the understanding of the client. So we tended to go after people who had an experience of what the pain of the client is on that aspect, and then we actually divide the company, we call it, between the hustlers and the hackers. So on the business side, the hustlers, we want people who have worked in government predominantly, or some sort of an experience working in relation with government. So some are private sector consultants who help developers. One of our co-founders was a consultant to the real estate industry, helping them navigate the zoning process. So he'd kind of experienced the pain of interacting with government. So that's aspect on the hustler side. And on the hacker side, I think all of us are suffering the same pain on the technical talent. And we do kind of three things. One, I think our advice is be open-minded what talent looks like. So for example, our chief data scientist, he wasn't actually a data scientist. His master's degree was in nuclear physics, and he was working at a kitchen on a night shift when we found him, because he wasn't like a formal data scientist. So, we gave him a chance, and he's thrived. Similarly, our very first software engineer, she has a degree in engineering, but it's actually chemical engineering. But then she took a 9-week coding boot camp, and we hired her. And so I think a lot of our, one thing we do is we say, like, a talented person can learn a field. So look for indicators of talent. We say we like to find winners, and winners will find a way to win. The second thing is we tend to go upstream. So I was supposed to be going to Washington State because we have an event all day tomorrow with the Secretary of Transportation. So it's a big opportunity for us to kind of get FaceTime. And then we got invited to give a speech to an SFU class. And so to give you a sense of our priorities, what would we rather have, a day with the Secretary of Transportation or with student-to-graduate students? And so we canceled on the Secretary of Transportation, because for us, it's harder for us to get real talented people than it is to, getting meeting with officials. And I think the other thing, part of that is, you have to look at in places where maybe people are underrepresented. So like a lot of our, we're hosting, it'll be public in a month, a major event around International Women's Day, where we're going to put a lot of our amazing female leaders. So our head of sales is a woman. Our UI UX designer is a very young woman. We hired her fresh out of UBC before she even graduated, and we put her in charge of all of our products. She runs all of our product teams. And so like we're going to showcase to a lot of young women around like this could be you, because we're finding that's one of these areas where if you're going to hire people, we got to get more women involved. So like that's a very self-interested reason why we're trying to promote women in tech, because it's a gap. And then finally, like I'm, as a citizen, happy that Amazon and other companies recognize Vancouver, but it was a terrifying thing for us to see these companies move here because they suck up a lot of talent. So what it's forcing us to do is now we have to go places. We just hired a guy from Finland, another one from Ukraine. We had to explain ourselves. We were doing some work with the Pentagon. They said, well, all of your citizens are at least Canadian, right? And we're like, no, our team they're citizens of China, Russia, and it caused a little bit of an alarm there. But that was what we had to do. We had to import talent. So it's a real war for talent. So I think there's those three things that we tend to do. Look unconventionally, go upstream, and then go abroad.
Interesting, Russia. Okay, so that's how it works. Let's stay on the topic of government for a little bit, because government touches very much, I would say, all of the businesses that you represent. Whether they're your customer, whether they're your regulator, whether they're your funder or support system, whether they buy your technology. Is the way that government's approaching technology today something that is helping you? Is there something that they could do better? Is it just a catastrophe that we really need to be moving all to the US or to some other country to be better able to do what we do? What's your take on where our public support is right now?
I can start.
Sure.
I'd say it's very uneven. So it sounds creepy, but we actually have a scoring system for like all the public servants in Canada and US, where we rate them based on their openness to new approaches. We have a way of we have kind of a secret way of we know how to ask certain questions to kind of prod their responses, get a sense of whether they're open-minded or whether they're kind of stuck in the past. And that's part of how we prioritize who we sell to is we try to meet as many people as possible, and then we score them, and then we prioritize them. And what we're finding is that there is actually, excitingly, there are some real leaders in the public service who we call internal champions, who are really willing to stick their neck out, move heaven and earth. The harder part is finding them. So I would say every government probably has someone there who's just been waiting for someone to give them proof that just we need to try something different, but they're looking for someone who can give them the tools to do it. Mm-hmm. So I think that's the thing, is we tend not to look at governments, but every government is a collection of people, and every government is as diverse as its citizenry. So you'll have some people who are really far ahead and some people who are really conservative. And the harder part is identifying who they are and then supporting them. So that's what I'd say. And some governments are better than others. And they won't always, probably if you look it up, probably the most advanced country in the world that gets data and technology is Estonia. There's a history why that happened, but they're fascinating in Estonia. And then in North America, I would say Kansas, oddly enough, is really, really far ahead. But Kansas and Columbus, but not a lot of the usual suspects.
Yeah. Dogu, do you find that you're marketing your technology to governments at all, or do you just stay as far away as possible?
Well, I sell to anyone and everyone.
And how?
I say no. The interesting thing about the government is it's a decision by committee thing, and there's not one person that you have to convince. There's a whole bunch of people in the room that you have to talk to, and some of them will say yes, this is awesome. The other one is like, no, let's not do it. And that's not as a startup, typical startup. You don't have the resources to go after every opportunity like that. Mm-hmm. The government approaches us for different kinds of projects, like municipalities. For example, they want to incorporate augmented reality and virtual reality into the development proposal process. So you can go to the site and then hold up your phone and see the building as if it is there, and tap on it and then leave comments onto different sections of the building as a community member. This is what's coming, and we're already working on one project with one province over there. And the other ones are coming for community engagement. For example, the exact same project, you could put a goggle on to see the building in its context in an incredibly realistic way, as if it is there with all the lighting conditions, change the lights and stuff, and then show the urban planning aspects around it. Basically, that's another government project. Typically, the planning department contacts us, and they're generally like contacting us to connect us with the architects and the developer, basically, and then we take it from there. So I don't deal with the government side of it too much, other than the invoicing, and it's hell of a game to get a net 90 check really issued as well.
So Mike, I mean, you know, there you are with your paperless construction projects. How's your permitting going?
Anyone from the city here? Yeah, everyone here knows it's a terrible process. I think this in every municipality, and some are better than others, but it's difficult, and it is. It seems or appears from the outside as if it's very disorganized. The processes aren't there. The leadership isn't there. The mentorship isn't there. The systems aren't there. There are, you know, standard operating procedures are. There's tons of them, robust. There's hundreds of them, but they don't work together, and so it really bogs down a simple process. Like, you know, I don't go to the building department anymore to drop off permits, but we have guys that get up at 5:30, get there at 6, and put their set of drawings vertically, and then go grab a coffee and come back, you know, an hour later, right, to get into drop off. So this can completely be streamlined. It's going to take a ton of effort on the city's part. I would love to help them, because I know as a builder and as a developer and as a you know, working in this community for a long time, it's really simple. Mm-hmm. It's very, very simple, and they're making a simple process super complicated. And if they engaged with the community and they brought in people like myself or on our subtrades and our architects and design teams for the building permit process specifically, I think we could alleviate 50% of the staff requirement there and put that staff into some other area which is more important, because it's like paper from person to person. Let's get our signature on a paper 17 times. If we created a very simple workflow, you know, in a current software, like the stuff they're using is just archaic, we could save hundreds and hundreds, millions of dollars, right? We've got jobs that you get delayed 8 months on a job that's worth $100 million because of city process. That makes no sense to me. And most of it is rental product, which is the funniest. And you know, it's funny enough. Like, we're fighting rental. We've got 5 rental projects in queue. They're all at least 6 months behind. At a minimum, one I've got 1.5 years behind. And this is just, it's unacceptable. So.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you weren't in my presentation, were you? You would know the virtual city representation, basically, where you would place a building into that. Right now, the city requires you to provide models, like scale models, to show the urban impact. It's just ridiculous to me. Like, you can't update those models every time. You have to get another one built for pretty much the same price. Mm-hmm. And then, like, you give them a set of drawings with it. They ask you for a rendering. Why not just literally build a 3D model and pass it off? And you don't even need to pass it off. You can just put it into that digital twin of the city and see all of the impact that building creates around it, and get the community engaged through that. Yeah. Like, we have the capability and the technology to do this, all of us together. It's just, we just need to get in a room with the city and talk them through this.
Is there anyone from a local government here, by any possible chance, that you're willing to stand up and and explain why?
So I'm preaching to the choir.
Just, we're all friends here. Okay. Yes?
Helen, I work for, well, when I started 29 years ago, it was called Public Works. Then it was called Public Works and Government Services Canada. Now they call themselves Public Services and Procurement Canada. Contractually, they still have to use Public Works and Government Services Canada. Anyway, that tells you their commitment. They're a political animal. The one problem is, I am a low dude on the totem pole. I'm a mechanical technologist. The guys that are holding the checkbook, they're nowhere near this room. They send a whole bunch of low-level people. I'm enjoying it, obviously. It's wonderful to be in this kind of environment. But the decision makers aren't here. They'll go in a meeting, they'll use the word BIM like a parrot, not knowing what it is, and then they'll go to the nerd and they'll say, nerd. You know, I got nothing to work with here, people. You know, so that's one of the issues. The leadership, they're not here. The people that can make the choice, they're nowhere near this building today.
Well, thank you for your candor. That was, yeah, thank you. So, Jerry, for next year, I think we need to make sure we've got some folks who can, you know, participate in that conversation, I think. Okay, so let's move on a little bit. One of the things I think was a common theme for me from all of your presentations this afternoon was this, you know, the conversation around, sorry, what's? Oh, okay, for sure.
Where's the switch? No, I was just going to respond. I mean,
please do.
You called me out on it. I'd just like to call all of you out on it as well. When we send out the blast for the next event, send it to your local politicians, government folks, get them here. You know them probably better than I do. So let's work together and get them here.
Yeah.
Even if that means we have to drag them.
You should change the name of the conference to Can't BIM.
Yeah. I've heard that before, Dogu. That's a good hashtag.
And why? Yes, that's right. Okay. Thanks, Jerry. Okay, so where I was heading was I was trying to sort of move past this somewhat awkward moment and and go back to really, you know, some of the main themes of today. And we're talking about sort of linking some of the amazing things that are coming out of emerging companies and not so emerging companies anymore. Where, you know, we're trying to demonstrate value of these new technologies in an industry that is really, you know, it does struggle to embrace new technologies. So what I was wondering was, you know, in your business development or in your, you know, client sales moments when you're in front of folks who are, you know, going to be participating with your company in whatever way, shape, or form that you're hoping that they will, what is it that you're saying to them that is that sort of, you know, the bottom line performance that you are going to provide to them? What is the value that you create? We had a little bit of a high-level flavor, but maybe I'm going to press you a little bit more in detail because they sound great in principle, but, you know, the day-to-day, real life, you know, we start here really. You know, I mean, Mark, just to give you an example, you know, you showed us the sort of limitless possibilities for what UrbanLogiq can do. And then we zeroed very quickly into transportation, which is an enormous area in and of itself. But, you know, so where is the value for this? And how do you get people started, I guess, down the road that you envision?
Yeah, so I think to your point, like, so for example, let's take, I won't name the city because it's a local city, but one of our clients, for example, we found out just because they require a manual paper process, we actually calculated, when I mentioned we followed people around, and we were able to calculate, they spent $187,000 and 7 months just on external consulting to come up with one map of traffic that they can then use to zone, like approve or not approve real estate development. So it's a key thing for their local development community. That entire process we now do in under 4 seconds, and it costs nothing. And it was purely because it was a manual process that required people to hand paper over, and then things get lost because someone goes vacation, so it gets stalled for a couple weeks, et cetera. And then millions of dollars of real estate developments gets bumped to next year. And so, you know, we identified, you know, this is like an actual tangible outcome. We quantified the benefit, $187,000 in 7 months to 4 seconds, et cetera. And then, so I think we identified, we call those use cases, so a discrete use case with an actual value proposition. And then the hammer is we guarantee the outcome or we don't get paid. And so we'll oftentimes put that in writing, which is we will ingest your data, build the models, build the data science, the algorithms, provide it to you, and then give you a period of time to use it. And if it does what we said it would do, then then you can charge us. If it doesn't, like even if we build it and it works, but it doesn't deliver the savings we promised, we still won't get paid. So oftentimes, like it's a really high hurdle. We had to promise just to get them to give us a chance. Although honestly, there's a momentum thing. Once you start delivering one city after the other, the fascinating thing about governments is there's a saying that we hear a lot is that in government, everyone wants to be, it's a race to second. No one wants to be the first to try it, but the moment someone else wins it, they can't go to their bosses and say, how come the city next door is using this technology and how am I supposed to answer my citizens? So what tends to happen is once we land a client there, we immediately start a hyper-aggressive program to blanket everyone else saying, you should watch what's about to happen here. And then it tends to fall like dominoes. So the first one is really hard, and then after that, it's hard to keep up with the multiple seconds. We tell everyone you're second. So that's kind of how it works.
So Mike, I mean, you have the additional challenge of dealing with, directly with the real estate community, both from the images, it was mostly sort of private sector developer clients that you have, not so much on the public side.
No, we're just starting to get into the public sector, doing some work at UBC and YVR and such. So yeah.
So how do you sell your vision for the way that ETRO is different from everyone else, given the extent to which one could argue the construction industry is largely a commodity industry?
Don't say that.
Okay, I'm being challenging then.
Yeah. So yeah, it's the sales pitch is our business about people. So it's not about the company, it's not about anything else, it's about people. And so our people are the best. And our people will deliver the best pre-planning. So our biggest sales pitch for us is the front end. Companies of our size don't have pre-construction department, or very good ones. They don't do that. They get drawings, they put a price together, and then they bid. Or they put a price together, they do value engineering, and then they start. They don't start. Like we are engaged, I would say 80% of the time at the acquisition of land, prior to architects being engaged, design team being engaged, or just thereafter. We don't do design, bid, build. Like we don't deliver that model. And so our value proposition for our client is, if you bring us on early and you tell us your end goal, we can get you there. And our delivery model is set up where we have a very robust, very, very strong, using a ton of tools and just some good old-fashioned experience to deliver our clients what they need at the value they want. And that's our sales proposition. But it's all people-based. It's 100% based on people. So
Interesting.
So for us, it's a little more easy because there's direct, immediately visible benefits. As soon as I put a VR headset on a client, they immediately see the benefits. It's more like showing a 2D drawing versus a 3D rendering, right? You take that to another level by putting on the VR and then show them a scale model. There's no need for it. You can just do it all in augmented reality from a marketing standpoint. But what we do also is we are contacted a lot by several enterprises to solve certain business problems for them, not just with VR and AR, but by utilizing a bunch of problems. And we basically go in there and analyze the situation. Because we're contacted by them directly, it's a lot easier for them, for us to convince them about the solutions. It's kind of easy, but also when it comes to billing and like quotations and stuff, that doesn't turn out to be that easy. And there's not much competition because it's a highly specialized skill set that is required to build the experiences or the technologies that we're building. So that helps a lot.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm going to just stop for a minute and just make sure, is there any questions before we move on to another sort of topic for discussion? Is everybody happy? Everybody's really happy. Okay, so where I want to go now is I want to talk a little bit more about data. We've been spending the day talking about what data can do, large amounts of data overlaid. Mark is the wizard of amazing amounts of data and what you can do with it. Buildings generate potentially enormous amounts of data. We could have, even in this room, hundreds of different data points generating information at, even at a single room scale, and then you sort of, exponentially grow them all up in through buildings to whole cities. How are you kind of getting your heads around that? I mean, we've got two of you whose lives are kind of immersed in data, a third who's basically single-handedly, it seems, changing the industry around to kind of be data focused. what's your philosophies? Have you got any comments that you want to discuss a little bit more about that? How it might integrate, because I mean, we've got essentially the intersection between city making, building management and optimization and construction. It's like you guys are sort of 3 parts of the triangle. Any thoughts on kind of where you think this is going, what you need, what you see as an issue potentially? Nope, yes?
So yeah, I think it's become apparent, well, it became apparent to me probably 8 years ago that in my previous life that we had so much data and we had no idea how to deal with it. We had no idea how to get it. We had no idea how to track it, and there wasn't, marks, around that we knew that could help us collect it. So, and then there was, resistance to, well, I don't want you mining that data. What else? There's other things in there. So, we have. When I started the company, I wanted a very robust, because our data is accounting, most of it is accounting data that we want, because actuals, budget versus actual is our life. We want to know what we had budgeted and what we actually spent for everything that we do. And so tracking it is important so that on the next one, we don't have to think about if we do a 10-story building and it costs X, it doesn't matter if inflation hits the building by 2% a year, 3% a year, but concrete as a ratio of building flat area is always the same. It's plus or minus a 0.25% on the volume. And looking at formwork or looking at windows, all those percentages work. So we've created through Excel and some like Google Sheets ways to, you give me a building, we take flat area, surface area, and parquet area, and in 8 minutes I can give you an estimate within 2% of your construction cost. But it took us a lot of work to do that, and we're not pulling and pushing data. So what we want to do is now manipulate that, take it and make it better, and then take weighted averages across all of our projects and do it in 10 or 12 different sectors that we work in, or 10 or 12 different product types. So we just need the person and the focus, which is one of the reasons why we engaged a director of technology and innovation to help us do this, because my plan is that in 5 years from now, we could do 10 times the work and have the same number of estimators as we have right now. Whereas if you go to the big general contractors, the more volumes, the more estimators you have, right? And having people count things just makes no sense to me. So.
I would say there's kind of 2 high-level things that we kind of use as our touchstones to keep us grounded, because I think one of the problems is there's already too much data, to know where to start, and this is only going to get worse. And so I think the first thing is we don't start with the data, we start with the question. So I think that's the first thing to ground yourself on, which is the whole point of data science is to actually deliver value. So I think in everything, it actually boils down to we're not actually changing that much. We're just actually trying to help whatever people are trying to decide, with the developers or governments. What are you trying to decide or understand? And from that point, then it's like detective work. Where can we get that data and make that better? So I think the first thing is boil it down to what is the question you're trying to answer. And that really helps you navigate and filter through. That's a lot of data, it's amazing, but it's not actually relevant. I think that's the hardest part, is figuring out what's relevant. And that starts with great questions. And that's why most of our work, actually, if you see how we engage with clients, the first almost 2/3 is us getting really, really clear about what are you trying to solve here. And then the last third is a sprint to put it together. The other part that's I think a challenge on the data side going forward is going to be, outside of Europe, this is by and large a Wild West, and I really don't think it's going to stay that way. So a lot of people are worried about, is the government come in and regulate the space? We've been asking now for over a year for government, in a weird way, we're a data company, we've been asking governments to please regulate us. And the reason for that is we need to know, is what we're doing going to be allowed? And so I think a lot of the cases, that's why we're actually with the Secretary of Transportation, supposed to be tomorrow, is we were actually unveiling we could do all these things, but we need the government to say these are the clear rules around what is permissible. And I think that's a really uncomfortable space to be if you're in a data company right now, is that all these things are possible, but they may not be legal in a couple of years. And so probably the one thing that it's problematic in a lot of ways, it's not perfect, but the one thing that we've actually been quite happy with is Europe came out with a very strict series of rules and laws around data ownership privacy called the GDPR. So we're deploying in Europe later in this year, but for now we don't have any European clients, and yet we made ourselves GDPR compliant because at least we're following some rules. And that's the most uncomfortable thing, is when you're building some things you don't know what the rules are. So people don't like rules, but trust me, if you've been in a world where there are no rules, that's much worse than there being really strict rules.
Right.
So I want to touch base on a couple things that we all mentioned. In my presentation, one of the top 10 strategic trends was about privacy and ethics. That's basically what Gartner suggested, that's going to be one of the tech trends this year and all the upcoming years for all the intelligent digital mesh components. And I agree with that. That's going to be massively important as we start collecting more data. But more importantly, actually, that the data right now is living in silos. Like every tech sensor in a device in this building, for example, will be pushing data into their own component, into their own backend. And then you're going to need a separate tool to evaluate for every one of them. So the heat sensors would be pushing into this one, and there's going to be the rain sensors will be pushing into that one. So that's the same thing that happens at a city level as well. The owner of that data is different for each one of those. And the interesting thing is you cannot correlate the two together if you don't have access to both parties' data. And we need to find open standards and ways of communication that is going to enable companies, entrepreneurs, or city-level authorities to be able to harvest this data together and come up with meaningful results. So this is one of the core principles of artificial intelligence. Your machine learning or artificial intelligence engine is as smart as only the data that you provided to that engine. So we're going to need that as well. Combining all of this in one common framework, common data environment at a city level is going to be key as well. And providing access and regulations through privacy and all the other regulations too, I think it's going to be essential.
Interesting. Okay, so this is going to be my last question to you guys. So this is fair warning to all of you that I'm going to be expecting some questions shortly, so you can start thinking about what you'd like to ask. As part of the sort of preface to this segment of the session today, I sort of put at the end, what would be the big ask? And you guys are representing, really amazing potential for what each of the technologies and solutions that you offer. But clearly there are things standing in your way. We've talked a little bit about the data, but clearly it goes beyond that. If you had, what I would really like you to think about as you sort of form your final sort of comments is, who should be in the room? We've heard a little bit about public sector owners and regulators, but who should be in the room? In other words, to whom would you ask about this particular challenge that is standing in the way of you unleashing the full potential of your company and your technology? Well, I don't want to sort of prejudge your answer, but clearly there are barriers to full implementation, full rollout, full growth opportunity. What would that be? And to whom would you ask that big ask? Whoever wants to go first, Mike.
Yeah, I'll start. So I'm a huge advocate of the trades and trade training, and I think our society and North American society over the last 20 years has been very focused, and I'm going anti-tech here for a second, but has been very focused on kids going to university, getting degrees, getting their MBAs, and then finding the workforce. And so my industry, and it's been, and I touched on a little bit, but our industry has been kind of like that. If the kids who aren't getting A's and B's, those kids, maybe you'll be a tradesperson and you're going to go and try something out, and really I think, and we've been doing it through the VRCA. I know they're doing education committee, going out to the schools and getting out in grade 10 and grade 9 when there's smart, young, talented kids out there who are looking for another option. And what they need to know is that the construction industry isn't hammers and nails anymore. We are a tech industry. We do have technology. We're doing cool things. We're building amazing projects, and we're working with and integrating with companies that are very forward thinking. And so it's really getting that stigma away and getting government to say, not every grade 11 kid needs to think about university. And if he's in grade 11, if we don't think he's going down that path, let's open up programs so that they can get trained and start them as carpenters or start them as plumbers or start them at, like the European model where in grade 10 you're making decisions, right? And you can always go back to university at that point, but at least you've got a skill. We've got too many 21-year-olds with limited skill sets. And then, it goes back to making sure that employers, union or non-union, have the right training programs internally, because we can't count on the governments and BCIT to train everybody. But we've got to set those standards and push that forward. And so for us, that's where the government at all levels should be pushing for it. It's a real problem, and in 10 years we're going to have a really big problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Can I jump in on that one?
Yeah.
I really appreciate what ETRO is doing in this whole concept, and it really is proven what I keep saying all around when I go to conferences like this. Every company is a tech company. There's no tech industry ideal that is completely separate from the industries that we're serving as enablers. It is just an encompassing term, right? Like there's manufacturing vertical, there's construction vertical, there is transportation vertical, but like every company is going to be part of the tech industry from this point on. So we need to act accordingly, and every government level executive or decision maker will need to buy in on that one. And that comes down to the government as well. The government will be just a tech enabler for everyone again. So providing these data standards are going to be part of their facility management mechanisms, not just like setting the alarm clock for a building, or setting the elevators on and off. They're not going to be the facility manager's job. It's about setting these standards for everyone to collaborate more effectively with these environments. What I would actually who I would talk to is a separate thing than this. I just wanted to contribute to that. It's basically, we're in Canada, and we're super risk averse when it comes to adopting new things into our daily lives. We're good at creating technology, but we're not as good as adopting technology ourselves, in my opinion. We need to be less risk averse. Like to Mark's point, basically, he went to Silicon Valley and got his first check in the first 20 minutes of a meeting. So we need to take bold risks to adopt these new ways of doing business. Like and I asked the same question, why don't we have virtual Vancouver? Why don't we have virtual Canada or virtual BC? We need to be able to start doing that. And it's not just for, burnishing our brand. It's more for really, there are applicable use cases. Ditch the scale model, the physical scale model, switch to this as soon as possible. That's what I would say to the government.
Right. Thank you. That was great. Mark?
I'll quickly, I want to also jump on Mike's point. I think like that education, we really need to rethink education from this thing where you spend 4 years locked in a classroom with no practical experience, then you come to the real world and you've memorized a lot of textbooks, but you can't even tie your shoelaces in like the real world. It's a real thing. But then the flip side to that, then for the next 20 years, as technology or the world evolves, suddenly you haven't, like your skills get out of date and you're approaching your 30s and 40s, and suddenly you're being replaced by a younger generation who has the most relevant skills. So I think that's one of these things where the education model path does not work. I think it's a lot more. There should be like you mentioned in Europe, they actually don't have, in a lot of cases, like in Switzerland, they don't have this hard separation between school and work. You kind of do both simultaneously, and we tend to do that like at our company right now. We hire university grads and et cetera, but like we're constantly sending them courses, and that's just a built-in cost and time schedule. Like it's just an accepted fact that we will spend like 1 or 2 months of the year in some sort of a training, whether conferences or internal development. So I think that's something that is universal. Specifically on the smart city space, I actually got my wish because like if you go to, there's a Smart City World Congress in Barcelona every year. It's 19,000 people, mayors, national leaders, and then there's one, our team was in Washington D.C. a couple weeks ago, 13,000 people. It's everyone from automotive companies to Google, presidents, prime ministers, and this is true, like you do not see the building community there, the real estate developers, the construction industry, and yet everyone's talking about how they have these like 3D renderings of how cities of the future will look, and yet the actual people who build are not there. And which was part of the thing why I was talking to someone earlier, like why we got really excited to be invited here, is because like we like to advise governments on how you could theoretically build better community, except the people who make most decisions about how the actual built environment and the quality of life of a community will be for the next 50 years, most of those decisions are not made in government. They're made with everyone in this room. So I think that would have been my request, is that this smart city thing needs to be less of an academic technology thing, and more bringing in the people who actually can actually look at a lot of these concepts and say, yeah, that might look really good from a theoretical point of view, but there are practical realities why you cannot, kind of clump these different types of buildings or these different types of different purposes together. Because one of these things, we really hammer home is you have to value the experience of people who know what they're doing. We're increasingly alarmed that in the smart city space, there's entire magazines dedicated towards smart cities. You will not find the development community in any of them. And that you'll see a lot more from Mary Berra from GM talking about how the built environment of the future is going to be. In Barcelona, the biggest podium that showed how future construction of cities will be, to make it sustainable, inclusive, etc., was hosted by Ford. Ford is now putting themselves out there as the future experts of the built environment. And those are the sorts of things where we're sitting there and we're like, I don't buy it. But again, we're oftentimes the one small company saying, our experience working with the development community is that might not be the wisest thing, but we're also not experts, so we also don't push our case that hard because it's not our place to say it. But this was actually what I'd like to be, is to bring the built community into the smart city dialogue, which is an absent voice.
Interesting. Yeah. That was a pretty powerful kind of wrap up. Thank you, you guys. Okay, over to you, audience. There's a microphone there. Just to give you fair warning, I have two lights shining right at me, so if I don't see you, like I didn't see Jerry just before, you might just want to say, I'm here, because otherwise I won't be able to see you. Are there any questions that you have for these guys at all? Oh, there's a question over there. Yeah.
Just one question, what do you think is going to be the mind-blowing thing in AR and HoloLens in 3 years, not even 5 years, but 3 years? It's very close as far as I can see from the design and actual construction perspective and the sales perspective. So you have all probably envisioned something. So what's your thing?
Go Dogu.
I can go last if you want.
Yeah.
I think the next version of HoloLens in the next 3 years, it's going to encompass that. It's going to have a much larger field of view, a lot more powerful graphics capabilities with built-in connectivity, which is going to enable you with geolocated visualization capabilities outside and indoors. I think we're years away from having every one of us put on Google Glass-like devices, but not that far off. I think in the next 10 years, we're going to ditch the entire concept of a mobile phone, the concept of a laptop computer, and stick with all spatial computing devices. We will all have, I believe, this is my belief, one form of AR glass in our lives. That's basically where we're moving forward with, because and that's also partly because of the screen resolution that we can achieve with the current capabilities and the extended capabilities of the displays. There's going to be a limit to it, and we're trying to overcome that limit by providing a much coherent 3D experience around your ambient world.
Thank you. That's great. Yeah.
Yeah, so Mike mentioned something that I found interesting, which was that, I'm paraphrasing, but that email is no longer an effective means of communication. And I wanted to know what that means in terms of internal and external communication. Specifically, it sounds like you're using Slack. Yeah. Yeah.
So I personally hate email. A year ago, I was getting over 200 a day. And so I would spend my evenings, after my kids went to bed, just filtering through emails, and it was an hour a day. So Dara was hired, and she's like, you guys are crazy, you guys need to move to Slack. And so we tried it, and my emails went to 75 a day, literally like that. And so the value is time. So we've gone that way. Now external communication with our clients, we're in the when we do kickoff meetings now, and this has happened only recently. We're not an email community. We have Slack channels for about half of our projects. I wouldn't say all of them, for general correspondence, things, meeting requests, odds and ends. But there is still a purpose for, like, our accounting department right now sends an email, that goes out with our billings, because that's tracked. We want that tracked. But we're trying to get it down to zero. And internal communication, there should be none at all. It would be the goal, but we're not perfect. It's just a waste of time, and it comes down to time and quality of life, and our people. I don't want to be doing that at night. My employees for sure don't want to be checking the email at night. And there's just an endless, thank you for the answer. What a waste of time, right? When you get that email, right? Just unnecessary. And the other part about email is when I first started in the industry, like half of the people and half of the vendors in O2 did not have email. We were faxing. Like I literally would sit at the fax machine for, and that was a waste of time too. But I learned how to pick up the phone. It's always natural for me to pick up the phone or go and see somebody, walk down the hall, versus the new generation. And again, I'm not stuck with the names and titles, but we say, get out of your desk and walk down the hall and talk to that person, or pick up the phone and call them, right? And that whole, we need to go back to that and get away from the nonsense in the email. So.
Thank you. There was a question here. Did you have a question? Yeah.
I actually do have a question.
Good.
What is your respective holy grail? What are you hoping to eventually aim for? Any of them? All of them?
World domination.
I mean, 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Well, I think the thing that frustrates us is just the unnecessary. You can however you want to quantify it or articulate, but like value loss society, based out of nothing but poor decisions that are preventable. So I forgot the term you had, but like augmented analytics, I think. So for example, it's Carnegie Mellon. The original idea for our transportation system, for example, was Carnegie Mellon showed that if you could just real-time traffic lights, you could reduce traffic congestion by 40%, carbon emissions by 21%, et cetera, just by better timing of traffic lights. Now, if you think about it, when you're at a stoplight, the magnet underneath you, the camera above you, your cell phone is pinging to that stoplight. I'm here and I'm stopped. And if you've ever been at that site where you're at a red light and there's like no cross traffic, but you're at a red light and they've got the green, think about how unnecessary that is multiplied by every intersection around the world. All of this is fixable, and it has been fixable for decades. And another thing, the thing that our claim to fame that got us to the White House was we showed a fairly simple thing where we found out we could predict what unemployment would be 4 months down the road down to an intersection, down to a neighborhood level. And it sounds fancy, but once you actually see the data science behind it, it's shockingly stupid. But the thing is, in a lot of those cases, there would, again, this is a public policy. Like I said, we are not experts. But once it's proven you could do these things, imagine what you could have done if you were the government and you had your hands on that information. Could you have done some sort of intervention to do that? The World Bank we found out was we found out you could actually identify 6 months in advance which girls are most likely to be pulled out of school in sub-Saharan Africa, et cetera. If a girl is pulled out of school for more than 2 years, she does not go back, right? And so a lot of these things in society you could have transformative differences into an individual person's life, but magnified worldwide, massive impacts in the world. And you're simply not doing it because we're not sharing data, we're not consuming data in a proper way. So I think that to us is a holy grail, and whether it be transportation or economic development, employment, et cetera, we're just hunting these things down. Our bigger frustration is that I think a lot of people just accept the status quo, like, well, you're sitting at a stoplight, and well, it's just the way it is. But it shouldn't be, and it's been unnecessary. And I think because we have a high tolerance for mediocrity, we don't insist on asking, why isn't this better? And I guarantee you, governments and society at large will not have an answer to you. I think that's our holy grail.
Mm-hmm. Other holy grails, and then we'll wrap it up.
Mark's quite smart, quite intelligent. I feel like a bit of a contractor caveman sitting here beside Mark. But for us, it's really everything that we're doing is about making, and for me, on the social purpose side, is being able to build very beautiful, very affordable homes for everyone. And so the modular that's built in this society right now, in my opinion, is not sexy. And so our goal is to build, you know, and what we want to be able to do, and maybe it's not box modular, or maybe it's not exactly as a form that's there now, but be able to build amazingly beautiful buildings faster with far less people that will stand the test of time, so we can build homes for everyone at an affordable rate. So.
We're in tech industry, and I hate technology. I gotta say that, and all of you hate technology too at the same time, because we need to get rid of technology. It is getting in between what you're doing, what you're trying to achieve, and yourself. Like if you're looking at this world through the lens of your phone, that's in between you. It's got to be seamless. It's got to be. It's only useful when it is completely invisible. It's seamless. It's transparent. That's what I'm actually after. It's got to be all ambient. Everything is done by whatever robots can be installing drywalls for you. It's all automatically done, installed with the sensors. It's like we're going to BIMgularity. We were talking about that earlier. And everything is done for like helping our communities, helping the human beings to have a much better, prosperous life, healthier life. And isn't that what the case when we invented just regular ordinary glasses? They are literally augmented reality devices because the person who's wearing them cannot see without them. So they're improving the reality. We have been cyborgs for a very long time with prosthetic limbs or like with braces on your teeth. We already had it. It's just we're taking it to the next level and making it all connected, more smarter, intelligent, and autonomous. I really can't stand the idea of having truck drivers. Seriously, that's such a waste of time and energy and like effort. We could be getting more like people doing more creative work. Why are we getting someone behind the driving wheel that they hold for 18 hours? When we can get the machines to do that, everything is carried automatically by robots for us. That's where I'm gonna go. That's where I'm thinking that we will go. And I'm doing my part for that.
Well, thank you. So, speaking as the cyborg in the room, clearly, I want to thank you guys very much for your time. Dogu Taskiran, Maierle, Masongsong. Please give them all a round of applause. That was great.